I'm 28 now, and I've been through some pretty terrifying situations in my life. But there's one night from when I was 16 that I just can't shake. It haunts me in a way nothing else does. It was my first real babysitting gig that wasn't just helping out family. This was for the Hendersons, neighbors my parents had known for years. The kind of people where everyone just assumes everything's safe because, well, they're family friends, right? They're okay with me sharing this, so I'll call them Robert and Lisa. And their daughter Emma was 6 years old. They had this beautiful 2-story home on Maple Street. You know the kind, white picket fence, trimmed hedges, the works. Looking back now, that's what messed me up the most. It looked like the safest place in the world, like nothing bad could ever happen there. It was a Saturday evening in late October. My mom dropped me off around 6:45. Robert and Lisa were all dressed up for some charity dinner downtown. Robert gave me this very formal handshake, like I was interviewing for my first corporate job or something. And Lisa, she must have said, "You're such a lifesaver," about 5 times. They walked me through the basics: Emma's bedtime routine, what snacks she could have, lights off by 8:30, and keep her bedroom door slightly open, just a crack. Lisa also showed me the doors. The front entrance had a lock they rarely used since they always came in through the garage, but the side door that led to the patio, that one needed both locks engaged. She pointed to the chain lock at the top and the regular handle lock below. I nodded along, thinking, yeah, I get it. A lock's a lock. I should have paid more attention. It was lightening up, normal evening. They left around 7:15. The second their car disappeared down the street, Emma asked if we could play dress up and hide and seek. The hide and seek part, I gently steered her away from. The house had too many rooms and I didn't want her crawling into some weird space and getting stuck. We compromised with a puzzle at the kitchen table, and then we played this cute animal adventure game on her tablet. One of those games where you just collect fruit and can't lose. Around 8 o'clock, I warmed up the dinner Lisa had prepared, spaghetti and meatballs, total comfort food. Emma ate at the dining table while watching her favorite cartoon, which I'm pretty sure wasn't usually allowed, but hey, I wasn't trying to be the strict babysitter on night 1. After we cleaned up, we brushed teeth and headed upstairs. Emma's bedroom was at the far end of the hallway on the 2nd floor. The house had this long corridor with a bathroom, a guest room, and the master bedroom before you reached hers. Her room had this charming little reading nook by the window, and in the corner near her dresser sat a tall wicker laundry basket. The closet was one of those with 2 sliding wooden doors. Inside were her clothes, some toy boxes on the upper shelf, and a bunch of stuffed animals piled on the floor. She had a small lamp shaped like a crescent moon on her nightstand that gave off this soft, warm glow. I read her a picture book about a bunny who was afraid of the dark, tucked her in, and as I was heading out, she asked me to wait in the hallway for just a little bit. So I stood there, listening to her shift around in bed for maybe 20 or 30 seconds. When everything went quiet, I figured she'd settled in. I left her door open just like they'd asked, maybe 4 or 5 inches, and walked down to the guest room closer to the stairs. The guest room had this older TV mounted on the wall and a queen bed that looked like it was only used when relatives visited. I turned on the TV, found some reality show, and stretched out on top of the comforter with my sneakers kicked off and my phone on the nightstand. The hard part was over, I thought. That feeling lasted about half an hour. That one night. I was half watching the screen when I heard these soft footsteps in the hallway. I looked toward the doorway and there was Emma, standing there in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She wasn't crying, but her face, it looked genuinely frightened. I sat up. "Hey, sweetie, what's wrong?" She didn't step inside at first. She just whispered, "Alex," that's the name I went by back then. "Alex, I heard something." I waved her over, and she walked in slowly, glancing back at the hallway like she didn't want to turn away from it. She said she heard a noise in her closet. I immediately thought, okay, it's probably just the house settling, maybe the heating kicking in. Behind the basket, pressed into the narrow gap between the basket and the wall, was a person. Crouched down, knees pulled in, trying to make themselves as small as possible. I saw their shoulder first, then a shoe, then their face. partially hidden, but I could see their eyes, and they were looking right at me. Everything after that happened in seconds. I didn't scream, I didn't freeze, my body just moved. I grabbed Emma with both arms, pulled her out of that bed like she weighed nothing, and I backed towards the door, never taking my eyes off that corner. The person didn't move. They stayed crouched there, like if they just stayed still enough we'd forget they existed. I ran down the hallway, into the guest room, slammed the door, locked it. I put Emma on the bed and told her to stay quiet. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. There's someone in the house. I'm babysitting. There's a man in the child's bedroom. The dispatcher asked if he had a weapon. I said I didn't know. She asked if we were safe. I told her we were locked in a bedroom upstairs. She told me to stay on the line, stay calm. Help was coming. I kept staring at the door, waiting for the handle to turn, waiting for him to start pounding on it. But it stayed quiet. The sound of sirens in the distance was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. The operator told me to wait until an officer knocked and identified themselves. When they finally did, two of them, flashlights in hand, one of them said my name. "Alex, it's the police. You can open the door." The third time was different, because his mom asked if I could spend the entire night. She said she had to be out of town for a work conference and wouldn't be back until late the next morning. She sounded really stressed on the phone, like she was running out of options, so I said yes. I figured it would be the same as the other times, just longer and more money. When I got to the house that afternoon, she rushed through the instructions at the kitchen counter while Tyler was already upstairs in his room. She said there was frozen lasagna in the freezer. He usually made himself cereal for breakfast, and I could sleep in the spare bedroom at the end of the hallway. She thanked me at least 3 times before she even walked out the door. When she left, I called up the stairs to let Tyler know I was there, even though he obviously already knew, and he just yelled back, "Yeah," without coming down. For the next few hours, I barely saw him. I could hear the video games through the ceiling. Gunshots, explosions, car crashes, all the usual sounds of whatever shooter game he was playing. At one point, I went upstairs to check on him and found him sitting cross-legged on the floor of his room, controller in hand, eyes completely locked on the screen. He didn't even look away when I asked if he was okay. He just nodded once, still staring at the TV. I went back downstairs and tried to watch something in the living room, but it felt weird. Being in someone else's house overnight, alone with this kid who barely acknowledged me. Around 7 o'clock, I heated up the lasagna and called Tyler down to eat. When he came downstairs, he didn't say hi, didn't make eye contact. He just grabbed 2 slices off the pan, looked at me with this expression I still can't fully describe, like I'd done something to annoy him just by existing, and then went right back upstairs without a word. He was being even less friendly than the other times. I stood there in the kitchen holding my own plate, feeling awkward and kind of unwelcome in a house I was supposed to be in charge of for the night. I figured he was just a weird kid, didn't take it personally. After I cleaned up, I went upstairs to get ready for bed. The guest room was pretty basic, small bed, 1 nightstand, a lamp. I left the door halfway open because I didn't like the idea of being fully closed in. I was sitting on the bed texting my friend Kara when I got this strange feeling like I was being watched. I looked up and saw Tyler's head slowly move back out of view from the crack in the doorway. He'd just been standing there, staring in at me. I laughed a little because it startled me more than anything, and I called out to him, asking what he was doing. He didn't answer. I just heard soft footsteps go down the hallway toward his room. I remember thinking it was kind of funny, like he was just being a nosy kid. I didn't take it much after that. Around 11, I put my phone down and turned off the lamp. I rolled onto my side, closed my eyes, and tried to fall asleep. I don't know how much time passed, but I woke up with this feeling. That feeling that you're not alone in a room. I opened my eyes and saw a dark shape at the foot of the bed. It took a few seconds for my brain to process that it was a person, standing there, completely still. I screamed before I could stop myself and scrambled for the lamp. When I turned it on, I saw Tyler standing at the end of the bed, not moving, just staring at me. The look on his face is still hard to describe. He looked annoyed, but also scared or regretful, like he knew what he was about to do was wrong, but he was going to do it anyway. Both of his hands were behind his back. I was 22 when my older sister asked me to watch her kids overnight while she and her husband went to an anniversary party about 3 hours away. I'd watched my niece Sophie and my nephew Mason plenty of times before, so it wasn't unusual or anything. Sophie was 7, super quiet and a little anxious, and Mason was 10, more outgoing but still pretty easygoing. They lived in this typical 2-story house in a calm residential area not too far from where we grew up. My sister went over the usual stuff before they headed out, but this time with a few extra details since I'd be there overnight. Pizza in the fridge for dinner, absolutely no horror movies, and lights out by 9:30. She also reminded me that Sophie sometimes gets a little spooked at night and might need me to check on her once or twice. After they left, the kids and I heated up the pizza and ate in the den while watching some animated movie. It felt completely normal, just another chill night with the kids. Around 9:30, I took them upstairs to bed. Their rooms were directly across from each other, with the bathroom between them. I tucked Sophie in first. She asked me to leave her door cracked open and keep the hallway light on. Mason just mumbled goodnight and was basically asleep before I even left the room. I headed back downstairs, flipped on the TV, and kept the volume pretty low so it wouldn't travel upstairs. Around 10 o'clock, maybe 10:15, I heard footsteps upstairs. I figured Sophie needed something, water, another blanket, whatever. I got up and started walking toward the stairs, but before I even made it halfway up, I saw her. She was standing at the top of the staircase on the landing, still in her pajamas, just looking down at me. I asked her what was wrong. She said, "You already came in my room and told me to go back to sleep, but I couldn't." I stopped mid-step. I told her I hadn't been upstairs since I tucked them in. She thought I was messing with her at first. She said I stood in her doorway just a few minutes ago and whispered that everything was okay. I told her maybe she was dreaming it. Kids do that sometimes, mix up dreams and reality. I walked her back to her room, checked the closet, looked under the bed, the whole routine. She eventually settled back down, but she kept staring at me as I left, like she didn't believe me. I went back downstairs, feeling a little weird about it, but still telling myself it was probably just a half-awake dream. About 20 minutes later, Mason came downstairs rubbing his eyes. He asked me why I came into his room, and I felt this wave of cold go through me. I told him I didn't go in his room. He said I stood by his dresser, looked at him for a few seconds, and then walked out without saying anything. I tried to keep my voice steady and told him he must have been half asleep, but now I was starting to freak out internally, because both of them said almost the exact same thing. Instead of sending him back to bed, I told him he could stay down here with me on the couch. That's when I really started paying attention to the house. Every creak, every shift, every tiny sound felt amplified. I turned the TV off completely. The silence was so thick it made my ears ring. Mason noticed me doing this, and I think it started scaring him when I put my finger to my lips and whispered, "Shh, just listen for a second." And then I heard it. Footsteps, light, fast, upstairs. And then I saw Sophie running across the upstairs landing, racing down the stairs, screaming, "Uncle Derek, Uncle Derek, Uncle Derek." When she got to the living room, I grabbed her shoulders and asked her what happened. She was sobbing, real tears, not fake kid dramatics. She was genuinely terrified. She said, "There's someone upstairs." That's when my heart really started pounding. This wasn't a prank. They weren't playing some game. She was crying real, panicked tears. I tried to keep my voice steady and told them, "Why do you think someone is upstairs?" She said, "Someone came into my room again and said goodnight, but it didn't sound like me." At this point, I was internally losing it, but I had to keep it together. I didn't want Sophie's crying to set Mason